Hey, what's up YouTube? It's Mark Timberlake and I'm back with a brand new video. And today, guys, I'm doing a little bit something different. So, as we know, NBA Finals recently ended. Football is coming back. Most importantly, my personal favorite, college football is coming back. So, I'm going to go over a couple different teams, insiders. Now, I'm not an Ohio State fan. As you all know, I'm a Michigan fan. But a lot of you are Ohio State fans, so I figured I'd start with Ohio State. So, let's look at last season first. So, obviously, they had a okay season. Wasn't the result they wanted. They got beat by Michigan for the first time in 8 straight games. Michigan beat them. So, obviously, some of the boxes that they wanted to check off, like top 4, national title, none of those got checked off. But they still checked off quite a few boxes as of having a winning record, having a new quarterback. They have a new quarterback. But they have a lot of good players returning, and they still have a very solid coach. So if we look at the insider for Ohio State this coming season, what is there to expect? Well, when you look at last season, obviously it was somewhat of a letdown. They lost to Michigan. They didn't go to the top 4. And, I mean, don't get me wrong. The Rose Bowl is a good bowl game. They were a highly ranked team, but they didn't go as far as they wanted to. So when you look at last season for Ohio State, it wasn't very big. It was kind of a letdown. It's not what you wanted to have Ohio State. So if you're an Ohio State fan, you may not look at last season as a win because they didn't accomplish what they wanted to. They went in there, they blew out Michigan State. Michigan State beat Michigan, and then they got beat by Michigan by a pretty good margin, 15 points. It's not what you were looking for out of them. So when you look at it, here's what you have to look at. You need to look at the fact that how is Ohio State going to come back to next season after that Michigan loss? Are they going to be able to bounce back and regroup and come back as a good team next season? Or are they going to dwell on it? Now, Ryan Day is a good coach. I'm a Michigan fan. I'm going to say this. He's a good coach. He's probably better than Urban Meyer was. Because he can run somewhat of a pass game. Not exactly great, but he can run somewhat of a pass game. Urban Meyer really could. So when you look at this incoming season, they have good wide receivers returning. They have good running backs. They've always had a good run game. And their defense, well, that's still to be determined, as their defense from last season struggled in different certain situations. So their defense coming in this season, we won't know until the season starts, in my personal opinion. So when you look at Ohio State coming in this season, some of you may agree with this, some of you may not. But here's what the deal is. Ohio State is a team that overall, their style of play is to take it slow, tire out the other team, kind of win it in the end. However, when they play another good team, like they did, like Michigan last season was a very good team. Oregon last season was a very good team. They couldn't tire them out. They went 100% the whole way, and they won. Now, Ohio State's recruiting class this year was a good recruiting class. I believe they were number 2 out of everything, with, I think, 1 5-star, quite a few 4-stars, and maybe 2 or 3 3-stars. So that's not a bad recruiting class. That's a good recruiting class. It's pretty good. Michigan did not have a good recruiting class, but that's because Jim Harbaugh tried to leave. With Jim Harbaugh trying to leave, he thought he was going to get the job at Minnesota, really didn't. That's like me looking at Jim Harbaugh. What Jim Harbaugh did would be like if my girlfriend left me for a couple of weeks to talk to another guy and then came back and said, hey, we're still together, that other guy didn't want to date me. It's kind of what Jim Harbaugh did. Left Michigan, thought he was going to get the coaching job at Minnesota, didn't, came back, said, okay, I'm still your head coach here because Minnesota didn't want me. So, but anyways, that's not what this video is about. This video is looking at Ohio State. So this coming season for Ohio State, do I think they have the potential to be a good team? Yes. Do I think they have the potential to win the Big Ten? Yes. Do I think they have the potential to make it to the top 4? Yes. Now, do I think they have the potential to win the national championship? No. Why not? Because they're a team that overall, their biggest problem is when they play certain teams that can make good adjustments. The last couple years they played Michigan, they couldn't make adjustments. Most of the teams they play in the Big Ten can't make adjustments to their defensive changes or their offensive changes. Most of the time, their run game is what does it. But if you shut down Ohio State's run game, Ryan Day can run somewhat of a pass game, but it's not very good. So when you run teams that can make adjustments to shut down their run game, they can't win games. So the big question every game Ohio State goes into is, how is this defense going to adjust? Are they going to make the adjustments they need to shut down the run game? So do I think that Ohio State has the potential to beat Michigan? Yes. Do I think they have the potential to make top 4? Yes. But do I think they have the potential to win the national championship? And that is no. Because when you get into the CFP or the college football playoffs, and you go up against those other 3 teams, they're in that top 4. Whichever one of those 3 teams you play, their defense is able to make adjustments to shut down a pass game. Or to shut down a run game. To shut down a pass game. Or a run game. Or whatever thing you have, their defense is able to make adjustments to try and shut that down. So when Ohio State gets their run game shut down, their pass game doesn't do enough to give them the win. So here's what it comes down to. If Ohio State gets their run game shut down, what adjustments can they make in the pass game? I do not think they have the adjustments to make in the pass game to be able to make it past the top 4 if a team shuts down their run game. Let's look at the past couple of years, for example, where Ohio State has made the top 4, not counting last season because they didn't. Let's look at the year before, where they made the national championship. Clemson had trouble with their run game. They had trouble shutting it down. And in the end, that ultimately is what led Ohio State to the win. Another thing that Ohio State can do, they can win games if they can control the offensive line. When you get in the CFP, you're playing against the other top 3 teams out of the nation. So it's a lot harder to control that offensive line. But when Ohio State played Clemson, they could control the offensive line, which is able to get their run game going. So basically, their run game evolves around a couple things. Number 1, can they control the offensive line? Number 2, how elusive can their run game be? Number 3, can they mix passes in to help keep the defense guessing, which can help their run game go because the defense can't just know that they're going to run the ball every time. So, basically, that's the 3 things that Ohio State's run game evolves around. Keeping the defense guessing, elusiveness, and how well they can control the line. How well their offensive line can control or dictate what happens. So, when you look at Ohio State, when you get in the college football playoffs, not only is it a lot harder to control an offensive line, but the defense can make adjustments very quickly to defend run or passes. So that's why I don't think Ohio State has the potential to win the national championship this year, just strictly because the defenses that they meet in the college football playoffs are going to be able to adjust. That is, if they make the college football playoffs. Now, obviously Michigan didn't have a great recruiting class, but that still doesn't mean that Michigan's the only team that can stand in Ohio State's way this year. There's other teams that are going to be able to stand in Ohio State's way this year other than just Michigan. Like, for example, look at teams that they might play outside the Big Ten. Now, odds are none of those teams are going to stand in their way. Like, I don't think Hawaii is going to stand in their way. Hawaii is good at stopping the run, but Ohio State's just bigger and more physical and stronger than Hawaii. I'm a Hawaii fan as well, but I don't think we're going to upset Ohio State. So you need to look at it like this. What does Ohio State have that they can use to counter against other teams? Because if their offense is going, that's good. But if the other team's offense is going, Ohio State's defense has got to be able to counter, which each season is kind of 50-50. You don't know how Ohio State's going to counter. So here's what you need to do if you're Ohio State. You've got to prepare or set up for the adversity of other teams. When you need to look at, now, if you're looking at prime teams in the Big Ten that could stand in Ohio State's way this year, here are a couple teams in the Big Ten that could stand in Ohio State's way. Obviously Michigan, because anything can happen in a rivalry. Penn State, Michigan State, and Iowa are probably the 4 biggest threats to Ohio State this season. Now, when you look at it, the team that I'm going to put as the biggest threat is just Michigan because it's a rivalry and anything can happen in a rivalry. Second biggest threat, I'm going to say, is Iowa. Third biggest threat is Penn State. Fourth is probably Michigan State. But when you need to look at Penn State, you need to look at a couple. So let's break down what they need to look out for Michigan. It's in Ohio State this year, so they already have a leg up. But what they do need to look out for is the fact that Ronnie Bell, a really good wide receiver, is returning. Cade McNamara is returning. And their run game, yes, they lost Hassan Hoskins, but they had 2 good running backs to fill in. So Ohio State, to handle Michigan, they need to be able to handle Michigan's adversity in a run and a pass game. And they have got to pressure Cade McNamara. If you don't pressure Cade McNamara and you let him stand strong in the pocket, he will fire balls all day. He will be able to run. He will be able to do whatever he wants, and it will be successful. So number one thing they got to do is they got to pressure the quarterback. Number 2 thing they got to do, they got to find a way to shut down Michigan. Michigan has a good pass game, but they also have a good run game. The key to shutting down Michigan's pass game is going to be pressuring Cade McNamara. The key to shutting down the run game is going to be to clog up the holes and to dictate what happens between the offensive and defensive line. Can Ohio State's defensive line dictate what happens? That will be the 2 keys to them being able to handle Michigan. Now, on offense, the key to handling Michigan is to be able to get their run game going and to be able to dictate what happens on the line against Michigan. Now, let's take a look at Michigan State. The key to Michigan State, shut down Michigan State's run game. Their pass game is not that great. You shut down their run game, you pressure their quarterback, you'll win that game. That's all you have to do. Now, the key to Penn State. If Penn State's in Happy Valley, they're a tough team to play. If they're not in Happy Valley, it's basically just play your football game, know your fundamentals. They're going to be hard to beat. People don't seem to realize this, but Penn State's a good team. If you go to Happy Valley and you get a win against Penn State, that's a well-deserved W. Penn State's not a bad team. Penn State's a good team. But now, Ohio State's biggest challenge is against Iowa. And I think a lot of us remember what happened last time Ohio State played Iowa. JT Barrett threw quite a bit of interceptions. Iowa put up 55. Iowa's a good team as well. They have a good coach. They've had good quarterback rotations. They have an outstanding defense. They have the most interceptions in the Big Ten as of last season. So the key to beating Iowa is this. Number 1, do not give turnovers on offense. And on defense, you need to create turnovers. You need to keep Iowa out of their element on defense, because if you don't, they'll take the ball away. They'll create turnovers. They'll win the game. So those are the 4. So we went through the 4 biggest threats for Ohio State. So how is this season going to shape up? If they can do what I said, I think they have the potential to at least make the top 4. If they don't, I'm going to say it's going to be a repeat of last season. They'll win most of their games, but they'll lose 1 or 2 games that will keep them out of the top 4. That's all I had to say for this. Next, I think I'm going to do an insider on maybe Kent State or maybe Michigan. I don't know. I feel like now that I did one on Ohio State, you go parallel, you go opposite, and you do the rivalry because you want to know what Michigan's keys are and what Ohio State and what the biggest threats are for Michigan this season. So I think I'll do Michigan next. But anyways, rock on. Good night.